"Hi, sir. Your wife hired me as a surrogate before she died." The words slipped out, trembling in the air, like a confession too heavy for a young girl like Emily to bear. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood there in the grand lobby of Blackwell Enterprises, clutching a worn envelope that carried the weight of her entire world. She had rehearsed those words over and over, but nothing could have prepared her for the cold, scrutinizing gaze of Alexander Blackwell, the billionaire business tycoon who stood before her. He was a man whose name was known across the city, figure of power and influence who could make or break lives with a single decision. His towering presence and sharp, tailored suit only added to the intimidation Emily felt as she spoke. But this moment wasn't about her fear. It was about a promise she had made, one she couldn't break, no matter how terrifying this encounter was. The lobby around them was a world apart from anything Emily had ever known. Marble floors gleamed under the bright lights, while tall glass walls showcased the city skyline beyond. Expensive artwork adorned the walls, and the distant hum of people moving about their business added to the overwhelming sense of wealth and privilege. Emily's jeans and simple blouse made her feel out of place, like an intruder in a world she didn't belong to. But she wasn't here to fit in. She was here because of Charlotte, because of the promise she made to the billionaire's wife. Alexander's expression was unreadable. His cold grey eyes narrowed as he studied her. Every detail of his face locked in a mask of controlled power. Emily wondered if he even remembered who she was. She was just a girl from a corner coffee shop, the one Charlotte had chosen to trust, with her most personal and now most painful secret. "I have documents," Emily added quickly, her voice faltering slightly. "Your wife, she arranged everything before she passed. She wanted to surprise you." For a moment, silence hung between them, as thick as the tension in the room. The mention of Charlotte's name seemed to stir something in Alexander, but whatever it was, he buried it deep beneath the stoic exterior he had mastered so well. Emily knew this wasn't going to be easy. She had seen the headlines. Everyone in the city had. Charlotte Blackwell's death 3 months ago had shocked the public. A philanthropist, a loving wife, and by all accounts, the heart of Alexander's world. The loss had left a void no one could fill, not even him. But now, here Emily was, standing in front of the man who had built an empire from nothing, telling him that his late wife had left behind more than just memories. She had left a future, growing inside Emily. Alexander's voice, when it came, was as cold as ice. "What kind of scam is this?" Emily flinched. She had expected disbelief, but the sheer force of his anger still took her by surprise. "It's not a scam," she said, her voice stronger this time. She pulled the envelope from her bag and handed it to him. "This is the agreement. Your wife's signature is on it. She hired me because she knew she wouldn't be around to tell you herself." For the first time, something like doubt flickered across Alexander's face. He took the envelope from her, but his movements were deliberate, cautious, as if any sudden shift in this moment might make everything collapse. Emily watched as he pulled out the papers inside. His eyes scanned the legal documents, and she could see the moment when he reached the signature, Charlotte's familiar handwriting, a name he'd seen countless times, but never like this. His face paled, just for a second, before the mask of control slipped back into place. "I don't believe it," he muttered, more to himself than to Emily. But she knew the truth was sinking in, no matter how much he wanted to deny it. "I have more," Emily said softly. She reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a sealed letter. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the final words Charlotte had left for her husband. "She left this for you." Alexander stared at the envelope. his name written in Charlotte's delicate handwriting. For a moment, Emily thought she saw the mighty man's exterior begin to crack. But just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. He took the letter, but didn't open it. Not yet. Why didn't she tell me? His voice was quieter now, more vulnerable. The sharp edges of his tone had softened, replaced by something Emily hadn't expected. Hurt. Emily took a breath, trying to find the right words. She didn't want you to worry. She knew you'd drop everything to be by her side, and she didn't want that. She wanted you to keep moving forward with the merger. She thought this baby would give you hope, something to hold on to when she was gone. Alexander stood frozen, holding the letter in one hand, the weight of the truth pressing down on him from all sides. Emily could feel the shift in the air. This was no longer just about a business arrangement or a legal document. This was about the future, a future neither of them had anticipated. I need time, he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. Emily nodded. She understood. This wasn't something that could be decided in a single moment, in the middle of a corporate lobby. But as she turned to leave, she felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. She had done what she came to do, but nothing felt resolved. Everything was still hanging in the balance. Her life, the life of the unborn child, and the life of the man who now had to come to terms with the impossible truth. Miss Carter. Alexander's voice stopped her just as she reached the door. She turned back, her heart pounding once again. Come back tomorrow, he said, his expression unreadable once more. We'll talk more. I need to see those doctors, verify everything. Emily nodded again, a pit of anxiety forming in her stomach as she stepped out into the cold world beyond. She had opened the door to a truth that was more complicated than she could have imagined, and now there was no turning back. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger than either of them could control. The next morning, Emily found herself back in the same place, standing at the entrance of Blackwell Enterprises, her nerves as tangled as they had been the day before. She hadn't slept much. Her mind raced with thoughts of how everything would play out. The truth she had carried for months was now in the open, and yet it felt like she was still teetering on the edge of something unknown. The weight of what was to come pressed down on her. As she walked through the polished doors and toward the front desk, the receptionist gave her a quick nod, indicating that Mr. Blackwell was expecting her. The short walk to his office felt longer than it had the first time. The marble floors, the towering walls of glass, everything about this place screamed power. And yet, in the midst of all this wealth, Emily felt like the most fragile thing. In the room, when the door to his office opened, Alexander was already seated behind his massive desk. His expression unreadable, his posture was rigid, and his sharp features were set in the same steely mask she'd seen before. But his eyes told a different story. There was something flickering beneath the surface. Anger, confusion, maybe even grief. Sit, he said. His voice clipped. Emily sat down in the leather chair opposite him, the silence between them growing thicker with every passing second. She clasped her hands in her lap, trying to steady her nerves. She could feel his gaze piercing through her, trying to figure out what kind of person she really was. The doctors confirmed it. Alexander said, his tone neutral, but the emotion behind it was impossible to ignore. Everything checks out. Charlotte did this. She hired you. Emily nodded, unsure of what to say. She knew that hearing it from the doctors must have been the final blow. There was no denying it now. Why didn't she tell me? Alexander's voice broke the silence, softer this time, laced with pain. I could have. He stopped himself, as though he didn't know how to finish that sentence. Emily looked down at her hands, unsure of how to answer that. She didn't know why Charlotte had kept this from him. Not entirely. She only knew what she had been told, Charlotte's fears, her determination to protect Alexander, even from the truth of her illness. "She didn't want you to worry," Emily said finally. She thought this would give you something to look forward to. After she was gone, Alexander shook his head, his jaw clenched tight. He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over the city. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, just stared out at the skyline as though searching for answers that weren't there. Emily could feel the tension radiating from him, the weight of emotions he wasn't used to showing anyone. He was a man who thrived on control, who built his empire on power and precision. But this was beyond his control. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily didn't have an answer for that either. She was just as lost as he was, caught in the middle of something far bigger than she had ever expected. "There's still time to figure that out," she said quietly. "We don't have to make any decisions right now." Alexander turned back to face her, his eyes filled with a storm of conflicting emotions. He didn't respond right away, but Emily could see the weight of the situation beginning to settle on him. He was no longer just a billionaire with a thriving business empire. He was a man faced with an unimaginable choice, one that would change his life forever. Over the next few weeks, Alexander and Emily met regularly. Their conversations were difficult, often filled with long silences and strained emotions. But slowly, they began to navigate the reality of their situation. Emily provided updates on her health and the baby's progress, while Alexander grappled with the idea of becoming a father, something he had never expected, especially not under these circumstances. But as they continued to meet, something began to shift between them. The initial hostility and mistrust began to give way to something more complicated, more human. Alexander, for all his wealth and power, was just a man grieving the loss of his wife, trying to make sense of the future she had left behind. And Emily, despite the impossible position she found herself in, was trying her best to honor the promise she had made to Charlotte. It wasn't long before the media got wind of the situation. Rumors swirled about the billionaire's mysterious meetings with a young woman, speculation about an affair, secret deals, and hidden scandals. Paparazzi began to follow Emily, and soon, her simple life was turned upside down. She found herself at the center of a media storm, with reporters digging into her past and cameras following her every move. Alexander, always protective of his privacy, reacted swiftly, using his influence to shield Emily as much as he could. But the damage was done. The world now knew there was something happening between the two of them, and speculation ran wild. As the pressure mounted, Emily began to feel the strain of it all, the emotional toll, the constant scrutiny, and the growing connection between her and Alexander. It was all becoming too much to handle. She found herself questioning whether she had made the right choice, whether she was strong enough to see this through. But the real turning point came when an old business rival of Alexander's, a man with a personal vendetta, used the situation to his advantage. He began to leak rumors to the press, twisting the truth into something far more sinister. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about a surrogate carrying the late Mrs. Blackwell's child. It was about a scandal, a betrayal, and a fight for control of Blackwell Enterprises. Emily found herself dragged into a corporate war she never wanted to be part of, with her own reputation on the line. Alexander, torn between protecting his company and dealing with the emotional fallout of Charlotte's death, found himself facing impossible choices. And amidst it all, the baby grew. a silent reminder of the future that was fast approaching, whether they were ready for it or not. As the tension built, both in the media and in their personal lives, Emily and Alexander were forced to confront the truth. They were bound together now by more than just a contract, by more than just a promise to a woman who was no longer there. They had to decide what kind of future they wanted to build for themselves, for each other, and for the child that connected them. But with the world watching and enemies closing in, the stakes had never been higher. As the weeks passed, the pressure only grew. Emily found herself in the eye of a storm that kept getting worse. The media wouldn't leave her alone. Reporters swarmed her apartment. Photographers followed her to the grocery store, and the online rumors got darker and more twisted. Everyone had an opinion about her, about Alexander, about the baby. Alexander did his best to keep her protected, but even his power had its limits. Every time they thought the story might die down, something new would surface. A rumor about the baby, a leaked photo of them meeting in secret, or an old rival making more accusations. Emily couldn't escape it, and neither could Alexander. It felt like their lives were spiraling out of control, all because of a decision that had once seemed so simple. In the midst of all this chaos, something unexpected happened. Emily and Alexander, who had started as strangers, thrust together by circumstances, began to rely on each other more. Alexander's icy demeanor thawed as he began to see Emily not just as a surrogate, but as someone who was trying her best to navigate an impossible situation. Emily, in turn, saw the real man behind the billionaire facade, someone who was grieving, someone who was scared, and someone who cared more deeply than he let on. One evening, after a particularly difficult day filled with media attacks and legal threats from his rival, Alexander invited Emily to his penthouse for dinner. It was a quiet meal, far removed from the noise of the outside world. They sat by the large windows, looking out over the city, neither of them saying much at first. But the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was almost peaceful. "I never imagined things would turn out like this," Alexander said, breaking the quiet. His voice was soft, tired. "When Charlotte made these plans, she thought she was doing the right thing. But I don't think she realized how hard it would be for everyone left behind." Emily nodded, understanding what he meant. "I don't think any of us could have predicted this, but she loved you. She wanted to give you something to hold on to." Alexander looked at her. His eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "And what about you, Emily? What have you gotten out of this?" The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on surviving the situation that she hadn't stopped to think about what it meant for her own future. "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought I was helping her, fulfilling a promise. But it's become so much more than that." For the first time, they talked openly about what lay ahead, about the baby, about their relationship, and about the future. It was clear that neither of them had all the answers. But one thing had become undeniable. They were no longer just two people bound by a contract. They had become partners in this journey, and somewhere along the way, something deeper had grown. Between them, the climax came unexpectedly, as things often do. Alexander's rival, desperate to destroy him, leaked the final bombshell, a fake story that claimed the baby wasn't Alexander's, but a result of an affair between Emily and someone else. The media went into a frenzy, and the public turned against both of them. It was the final straw. Alexander acted quickly. He called a press conference, something he had avoided for weeks. Determined to set the record straight, Emily stood beside him as he faced the cameras and told the world the truth. He spoke about Charlotte, about her illness, and about the difficult choices she had made. He defended Emily, explaining her role in Charlotte's final wish, and made it clear that there had been no affair, no scandal, only the love of a woman trying to leave behind a legacy for her husband. In that moment, Emily saw a side of Alexander she hadn't fully appreciated before. He wasn't just a powerful billionaire. He was a man who loved deeply, who cared about his family, and who was willing to stand up for the people he cared about, no matter the cost. The press conference changed everything. The media storm slowly began to die down, and the truth about the situation came to light. Alexander's rival was exposed for his lies, and Blackwell Enterprises came out stronger than ever. More importantly, the chaos around Emily's life finally eased. The paparazzi stopped following her, and the public's interest faded as quickly as it had ignited. In the end, the baby was born, a healthy little girl with her mother's eyes. The moment Alexander held his daughter for the first time, something shifted in him. The grief he had been carrying for so long seemed to lift, replaced by the joy and responsibility of being a father. Emily, watching him with the baby, felt a sense of closure. She had fulfilled her promise to Charlotte, and though the journey had been harder than she ever imagined, it had been worth it. But it wasn't just about the baby anymore. In the process of bringing this new life into the world, she had found her own place in Alexander's life. As the months passed, Emily stayed close to Alexander and his daughter, though not in the way she had originally thought. Their bond grew stronger, but it wasn't just about duty or obligation anymore. It was about something real, something that had blossomed out of shared experiences, pain and healing. In the end, Emily had found not just a future for herself, but a new family, a place where she belonged. Alexander, once consumed by loss and guilt, had found a way to move forward, with both Emily and his daughter by his side. And though the world had tried to tear them apart, in the end, it had only brought them closer together.